Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel of Truth, Trust and Transparency. It's been a while since I've done any of these videos, completed the challenge at the end of the year, had a nice break and rolled into the start of this year with some fresh site content. But there was a couple of you guys that reached out that I didn't quite get to, so I think each week or whenever I have time, I'm going to go back down a list and get to a few of you guys that I couldn't reach before or do within the challenge. Ones that are good, ones that have all the details there that I need, and Gabe is no different. So Gabe has sent me through his circumstances, going to run through that question now. If you're finding good value from these, again, appreciate it if you would hit subscribe, like, comment. Any questions that you have, please put them in the comments. As usual, not a financial advisor, not allowed to give financial advice. However, if you ask me, hey, let me know your opinion, I can do that. And I record it and I'll put it up online in the hope that it also helps other people other than Gabe. So firstly, he sent me this massive question around how interested he is, my videos and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. I won't read all that out, but he said, would you be interested in looking into my case? I said, yeah, no problem, send it through. He said, I'm grateful for your response. Let me provide some context. I'm a 43-year-old married man with a 1-year-old toddler and expecting my second child. Personally, I work as a sales rep in the healthcare industry, earning $180,000 plus super and target earnings on top of my base salary. Originally from Brazil, I moved to Sydney on a student visa in 2008, became a sponsored worker in 2011, gained permanent residency 2 years later, and Australian citizenship in 2015. That same year, I bought my first investment property as a rent vest strategy while still living in shared accom. I then purchased my second property, which became my primary residence in 2018. Using the equity from my first property in 2021, I acquired my third property, which serves as my second investment property. Here's the numbers. Now, IP1 is a unit. Purchased it for $280, currently valued at $500, current loan balance of $180, P&I leased at $500 a week. I've went through and calculated how this how this property runs. It's about 6K positive from the numbers that I've quickly run there. IP number 2 was a Queensland unit purchased for 500K. Current value is current value, he said between 850 to $1 million, so I just sort of went 900K for level ground. We've got 2 loans in there. I've combined them together, 500K a month. Currently rented at $660, going to $710 in the next month. So I've used that for your rent and expenses. And then the PPOR in Randwick, which was purchased for $650, current value $950 to $1 million. Just put $1 million there for round numbers. Current loan and an equity loan on top of that one. So I've put it all there. We see this property be about 6K positively geared. This property be about minus $5,000 negatively geared, and then the PPOR, obviously because there's no rent coming in, costing about $45,000 a year. So total not bad. The IPs are paying for themselves, and then has the PPI debt. As our family expands, we're evaluating whether to upgrade to a larger home, potentially selling our primary place of residence and investment property number 1 to afford a new home between that 1.3 to 1.4 million. Given that we've been living off one income for the past 14 months and will continue to do so for the next 12 months, servicing the new loan could be challenging. An alternative option is to rent a property for $1,000 to $1,300 per week for the next 12 to 24 months to reassess our situation further. This would allow us to potentially purchase another investment property for around $750,000 using existing equity in investment property number 2, although it might limit our borrowing capacity for a new PPI for several years. And lastly, but not least importantly, I am serious about property development and designing a plan to allow me to fully transition my current employment, which is limited earning scope, to something that would allow my greater ability scope to earn more. Sorry, Dave, I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on my situation. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks very much. Cheers. Let me know if there's any questions. All right. I went back to Gabe and I said, hey, Gabe, what's your end goal? Because, you're providing all this detail, but I don't really know what the end goal is. So he said, end goal is to retire my wife, allow her time to grow her complementary healthcare business organically, and also look after the kids, and for me to retire at 60 to 62. So I'm giving you about 20 years on what you've got. with about 160K to 180K passive income and have the PPR fully paid off by then. Thanks, Dave. Okay, now, Gabe, couple of things. One thing I firstly looked at was the super balance. You had 360 grand in super, some really quick high-level maths, and again, not financial advice, you need to speak to an accountant about this. However, one thing you could consider in your super with $360,000 means that I could probably go out there and get $1 million worth of property with debt of about 750. Now, judging by your income, if you were just to make those contributions for the next 20 years, you'd put about 432, give or take, $1,000 worth of repayments against those mortgages. Plus, you have the rent in there. If you went out and bought $1 million worth of real estate, 10 years it doubles to 2, 10 years again it doubles to 4. Meaning you'd probably be left with debt levels of around 400 to 500K. When you get that really good accounting advice, you can be strategic when you're selling your super to minimize the tax, because it's definitely different to inside your portfolio in terms of the tax and at which time you sell. So if you're sitting on a $4 million asset with, call it 500 grand worth of debt, it leaves you with $3.5 million, which you could then deploy into, say, a commercial real estate. At a 6% yield will bring in $210,000 of passive income. So that's one way to do it. Pretty easy inside your super. We're not even looking inside the portfolio. Something to consider. Talk to a really good accountant about if you need a shout or some people to talk to. Happy to recommend you some people to have a chat with. Now that there and then 200K will achieve what you want in passive income goals in the time. Now let's talk about the rest of your portfolio. And one of your ideas that you had was sell PPR and sell IP1 to get into a primary place of residence. Now, I don't know the detail around what you're currently living in, how it services your family, and whether or not that is a really high and strong priority. For some people it is, and I'm not going to tell you which one, but if it is to sell into the PPR, what I did was calculate sort of a rough cost base and what sort of profit you'd get if you sold your current PPR and if you sold your IP. I've actually just realized the mistake, but that doesn't matter. Perfect, fixed it. So essentially, IP1, by the time we add in our cost base, we sell this, we're left with 120 grand. So we've got a cost base of, say, 340. We sell it for 5. We're left with 160. We pay a bit of tax, 120. For your PPR, you spent 725 on it, which means you profit, if you're selling it for $1 million, 275. So you'll probably as well be left with a little more money in your account because, stamp duty and those upfront costs you pay when you purchase it, but you've only got a $555,000 loan against that. So once you sell for $1 million, the bank will come in and take their $555,000, which means you'll be left with $445,000 there. You'll be left with that in cash, but really on paper, you would have realized the $275,000 gain. So depending on how you want to play that cash in the bank or what you've made on that investment, plus the 120. So you're either at 565 or 275, 395K. So there's two options that you'll be sort of left with, but obviously in your bank account you have about 565. That's okay. And what you can do, and if you went into and put that all against your PPR, if you're buying something brand new at 1.3 million, I take out there and I say there's obviously stamp duty and all those sorts of things. So let's just say you can take away 475 grand off that. You'd be left with a debt on your PPR of 825K. Times it by, to get an interest rate, again, it's going to be costing you about $45,000, which is not too different to where you are completely here. $45,000, that's your mortgage cost plus maybe an additional 10K if it's a unit or not. So 55K, it's not too bad. Now, 1.3, what I sort of go to work out, and I say 1.3, 0.80%, you have $1,040,000 minus 825. I'm doing this on the fly. So you have automatically $215,000 of usable equity in your home. If you dump it against your, sell it the profit, put it against your mortgage, you then may be able to debt recycle out. I've done videos on debt recycling, go and have a look at them. You can then debt recycle out $215,000. So not a bad result. And what you could do is sit on that PPR for a little bit, because again, don't know where you're buying it, but if it's around Randwick and those eastern suburbs, you know, you might quite easily get a jump to $1.5 million. If that is the case, you know, you're up to 375K, which when I bundle that with the usable equity here, it's enough to sort of play in that development space with. So, couple of options. If you say to me, you go, look, Dave, the PPI is the priority, we need to sell down, go into that. Cool, that's no problems. Maybe you sell down, you get into the PPR, you leave it for a little bit, you leave it for 12, 24 months, you know, you got the new kids and you're juggling the family, maybe you're saving up a little bit of money. You can definitely do that. And then once you get a valuation that hits X on that new property and you unlock a level of equity that then you can access because maybe your partner's back at work, then that's when you can jump into it. Another thing as well, and something to probably note, is that you've got a lot of usable equity in the portfolio. 220, 245. You've got over 500 grand there, which is more than enough to get started in development. So if it's a serviceability thing, then maybe it's just about parking cash. Or, you know, one thing that I'm starting to do now is that you need to remember that just because you're buying something, especially in the development world, doesn't mean that you need to come up with the cash straight away. If you can get a 6 or 12 month settlement, then you might only be 6 months out from starting to get out there, do your research and start making offers, you know, with 6 to 12 months of settlements, so that by the time that you need to settle it and come up with the money, your partner's back at work, you can unlock that equity and you can settle on it with the cash. That's a quick way that you can get into it. Another little thing that I looked at and thought about is, as well, with just these two units, and this is why I don't particularly like holding units as the remaining properties in my portfolio at the end, is because obviously there's going to be a bit of strata cost here. So what I did is I projected the current rent that you've got now, 4% in annual increases in 20 years. IP1 is going to be about 55 grand, IP2 is going to be about 78 grand. Now, minus $20,000 worth of expenses. So that's going to be, for example, strata per quarter, and it's going to be land tax, 20 grand per dwelling, tick, meaning you're at about $93,000 of passive income if you can pay off these two mortgages. Now, what I would be looking to do, myself personally, and if we look at the loan amounts, 180 and 500. So you're on $680,000. Now, again, if you use, so it's 375, I'm going to add on, I'm trying to get to 100, I'm trying to get to 500 grand of usable equity for a development. So if I put on 125 grand, that will increase my equity amount. That's 805K. Now, I might be able to put that 500K into one project, right? That makes me 5, 6, 7, 800 grand. So in a space of 18 months, I might get my 500 grand back, and then I might get a profit of, say, 6 to 800K. Now, this is where the power of development comes in, is you can go, okay, I'm going to take that 6 to 800K and I'm just going to put it in the offsets, boom, boom, or pay off the mortgages fully on that. Or you can do it really strategically. You're going to need financial advice just regards to the structuring, because I don't know what structures these are in. Whether or not you pay yourself fully, pay these out, pay, you know, a higher tax rate, or you move and look at a sort of company structure, or you know, potentially depending how much your wife earns, if it's a discretionary trust structure, you might be able to be smart with how you put the money in. But either way, you've got the money then to almost wipe out completely the debt on these two of 805K in one development, or maybe it's going to take two. And if we're saying each development is going to be about 18 months, then it's pretty easy for you to go up there and do that, right? 18-month time. Or, and if you're like me, you can double down, and then you can split that original 500 into a similar size deal, and then the 6 to 800K, pay your tax on it, you keep it within the company, then you invest it in another deal. 500K in here, 500K in here. Cool. Finish that deal. That splits into, and that splits into. I have the 500K I put in. I have the 500K of post net profit. And so 18 months time here, 18 months time here. So that's in 3 years time, you might be able to go boom, 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 boom. Now what you can do, obviously with that and half of that, we can pay off portfolio. Then you're sitting at about 1.25 mil, which you could go out and buy, for example, in cash completely, 2 houses and put 2 granny flats on. And they would rent for 50 or 60 grand a piece. You have 2 of them, that's 120 on top of that, you're already there. So that's how quickly property development can kind of get you there. But to me, I think, Gabe, you need to get really clear on what you and your partner, what you really prioritize at the moment. If the current portfolio and the current property is great and can sustain the new kid, perfect. Then it might just be about waiting till your partner comes back on deck so you can unlock this equity to invest or to develop, because you've got enough there already. Similarly, if it's not and you need to go into that new PPR, you definitely can. You can sell that down. You don't have to. But if you did, you'd be at a similar negative cash position that you are today, which is okay. You might sit on that for 12, 24 months until it hits an amount, go boom, and then just start developing 3, 4, 500 grand. That's the sort of target capital amount you want to get into and start developing with. And then to me, it's about, you can sort of double down or do as much as you want with this amount or as little as you want. You know, you can double down and do 2, 3, 4 projects. For me, it's about having 3, 4, 5, 6 happening at a time, and then taking some money off the table. Maybe it's commercial, maybe take some over there, all that kind of stuff, as well as your super, plenty of options. And this, your super alone could probably get to that passive income. Plus with you've got there, and then maybe if we throw in a house and a granny flat, we'll definitely push you over the amount. But hopefully a bit of clarity there, some things to think about with your partner. Again, not financial advice, probably need a really good accountant to run something like this by, but some things to think about and discuss. Any other questions, let me know in the comments.